Victoria Hale stood frozen in the executive washroom, staring at two pink lines that threatened to dismantle everything she'd built. Her hands trembled as she gripped the marble counter, the same hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts without flinching. 3 months ago, she'd made one impulsive decision with Daniel Reed, a project manager who worked floors below her corner office. One night when titles didn't matter, when she wasn't the CEO and he wasn't a subordinate. One night that now carried consequences neither of them had planned for. The pregnancy test clattered into the waste bin. Outside her locked door, the company she commanded continued its relentless pace. But inside, Victoria Hale, the woman Forbes called untouchable, realized she was about to become the most vulnerable she'd ever been. Before we continue, I want you with me until the very end of this story. If you're watching, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're tuning in from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's dive in. The morning light cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hale Industries' executive suite with surgical precision, illuminating every corner of Victoria's domain. She'd arrived at 6:30, as always, her charcoal suit pressed to perfection, her dark hair pulled into a flawless chignon. To anyone watching, she was the same woman who'd transformed a struggling manufacturing firm into a tech innovation powerhouse in 7 years. No one could see the nausea she'd been fighting for 3 weeks. "Miss Hale, your 8 o'clock is here." Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Victoria took a measured breath, pressing her palm flat against her stomach beneath the desk. "Send them in." She'd taken 3 pregnancy tests in the past 4 days, all positive. Each one had felt like a betrayal by her own body. The body she'd trained to endure 18-hour workdays, cross-country flights, and the constant pressure of being a woman in an industry that still questioned her right to lead. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her entire adult life proving she didn't need anyone, that she could outthink, outwork, and outlast every competitor. And now she carried inside her the evidence of the one night she'd let her guard down completely. 3 months ago, the product launch celebration. Victoria's mind drifted back despite her best efforts to suppress it. The hotel rooftop had been stunning, the city lights spread below like scattered diamonds. The launch had exceeded projections by 40%, and for once, Victoria had allowed herself a glass of champagne. Then another. She'd stepped away from the crowd, needing air, needing distance from the congratulations that always felt like assessments of her worth. Beautiful view. She'd turned to find Daniel Reed standing a respectful distance away, his tie loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder. He managed the infrastructure team, competent, quiet, someone who delivered results without demanding credit. "It is," she'd replied, surprised she didn't mind the interruption. "You pulled off something remarkable today," he'd said. "The whole integration system, it's going to change the industry." "We pulled it off," she'd corrected. "Your team's back-end work made it possible." He'd smiled then, and she'd noticed for the first time how it changed his face, softening the careful professionalism he always wore. "You don't usually share credit." "Maybe I'm tired of taking it all alone." The words had surprised her as much as him, but something about the champagne, the success, the way he looked at her like she was just a person and not a quarterly earnings report, it had lowered her defenses. They talked for an hour. About work at first, then about everything else. He told her about his daughter Emma, 7 years old, brilliant and stubborn. About his wife who'd died 4 years ago from an aneurysm, sudden and cruel. About rebuilding a life as a single father while trying to prove himself professionally. She told him things she never shared. About the uncle who'd built Hale Industries and died leaving it to her. His spinster niece, as the board had called her. About the loneliness of leadership. About wondering if success was worth the isolation it required. "You want to get out of here?" she'd asked, shocking herself. He'd studied her for a long moment. "Are you sure?" "No," she'd admitted, "but I'm asking anyway." Victoria's intercom buzzed again, jolting her back to the present. "Miss Hale? Mr. Chen is waiting." She straightened in her chair, muscle memory taking over. "Apologize for the delay. I'll be right with him." But before she could stand, her stomach lurched. She barely made it to her private bathroom before losing what little breakfast she'd managed. When she emerged 10 minutes later, face washed, makeup reapplied, she found her assistant hovering near her desk. "I rescheduled Mr. Chen," Patricia said carefully. "Told him you had an urgent call with the board." Victoria met her eyes. Patricia had been with her for 5 years, had seen her through hostile takeover attempts and industry scandals without blinking, but now concern flickered across her features. "Thank you," Victoria said simply. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly fine. Just something I ate." The lie sat bitter on her tongue, but she couldn't afford truth. Not yet. Not when she hadn't even processed it herself. 7 floors below, Daniel Reed stood in front of his team, reviewing the timeline for their current project. The conference room smelled like coffee and dry erase markers, familiar and grounding. "Infrastructure migration needs to complete by end of quarter," he explained, marking phases on the whiteboard. "That gives us 8 weeks. Tight, but manageable if we stay coordinated." "What about the compliance review?" Marcus, his lead developer, asked. "Legal's been dragging their feet." "I'll handle legal," Daniel assured him. "Focus on the technical specs." As the meeting continued, Daniel's mind wandered despite his best efforts. He'd been doing that more lately, losing focus, getting distracted by thoughts of that night 3 months ago. He'd told himself it was a mistake. Not because of Victoria, never because of her, but because of everything it complicated. She was the CEO. He was a mid-level manager. She had the power to end his career with a word, and he had a daughter who depended on his stability. But when she'd looked at him on that rooftop, when they'd talked like equals, when she'd invited him back to her hotel room, he hadn't been able to say no. Hadn't wanted to. That night she hadn't been Victoria Hale, untouchable CEO. She'd been vulnerable, funny, startlingly honest. She'd traced the scar on his shoulder from Emma's complicated birth and listened when he'd talked about his wife without the usual pity people offered. And when she'd fallen asleep with her head on his chest, he'd felt something he hadn't experienced in 4 years, the possibility of not being alone. Then morning had come. She'd been polite, professional, distant, had thanked him and made it clear it was a one-time thing. He'd understood. Of course he'd understood. But it hadn't stopped him from hoping she might acknowledge it afterward, might give some sign that it had meant something. Instead, she'd been perfectly cordial at work. No different than before, as if it had never happened. "Dad? Earth to Dad." Daniel blinked, realizing the meeting had ended and his team had filed out. Only Marcus remained, watching him with amusement. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you wanted to grab lunch, but you were somewhere else entirely." Daniel managed a smile. "Just thinking about the timeline." "Right," Marcus said knowingly. "The timeline. That's what that look was about." "Don't you have code to write?" Marcus laughed, heading for the door. "See you at the status meeting this afternoon. Try to stay present, yeah?" Alone in the conference room, Daniel exhaled slowly. He needed to get it together. Emma had a parent-teacher conference next week, and his mother was asking when he'd start dating again, and work demanded his full attention. He couldn't afford to keep thinking about a woman who'd made it clear he was a pleasant memory, nothing more. Well, Victoria made it through the rest of the day on autopilot, her assistant running interference on the meetings she couldn't handle. By 7 p.m., the executive floor had emptied, leaving her alone with the city lights and the truth she could no longer avoid. She was pregnant. At 38 years old, she'd assumed that ship had sailed. She'd never wanted children, or at least she'd convinced herself she didn't. Her life didn't have room for that kind of vulnerability, that kind of risk. But now, with her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, she felt something unexpected. Protectiveness. And terror. Her phone buzzed. A text from her doctor's office confirming tomorrow's appointment. She'd called them yesterday in a moment of panic, using a fake name, paying cash, as if secrecy could make this less real. Victoria stood, moving to the windows. Somewhere in the building below, Daniel was probably packing up to pick up his daughter. He'd mentioned she took gymnastics on Tuesdays, that she was fearless on the balance beam. What would he say if he knew? The thought sent ice through her veins. She imagined his face shifting from shock to calculation, wondering what this meant for his career, whether she'd expect anything from him. Or worse, she imagined him being kind about it, offering support he didn't owe her, turning their one perfect night into an obligation. She couldn't tell him, not yet, maybe not ever. But even as she thought it, she knew that was impossible. He deserved to know. Eventually. Just not today. The next morning, Victoria sat in a nondescript medical office in a neighborhood far from her usual circles. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, reviewed the blood work results. "You're definitely pregnant. About 10 weeks based on your hormone levels and the ultrasound." 10 weeks. The timeline matched exactly. "I need to understand my options," Victoria said carefully. The doctor nodded without judgment. "Of course. You have time to decide, but not unlimited time. I'd recommend thinking through what you want within the next 2 weeks. And if I continue the pregnancy? Then we'll start prenatal care immediately. At your age, we'd classify this as higher risk, but that doesn't mean there will be problems. It just means more monitoring." Higher risk. Of course it was. "What about work?" Victoria asked. "I have a demanding job, extensive travel, long hours. You'll need to make adjustments, especially in the 3rd trimester. But plenty of women maintain careers during pregnancy. It's about finding balance." Balance? Victoria almost laughed. She'd built her entire life on the absence of balance, on pushing harder than everyone else. "Can anyone tell?" she asked. "I mean, physically." "Not yet. But soon you'll start showing, probably around 14 to 16 weeks. Morning sickness should ease up in the next few weeks, though some women experience it longer." Victoria absorbed this, calculating timelines. She had maybe a month before her body betrayed her secret to anyone paying attention. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course. But Victoria, may I call you Victoria?" She nodded, surprised by the doctor's gentle tone. "This is your choice, and no one else's. But you don't have to make it alone. If there's someone you trust, someone who can support you, it helps. This is a lot to carry by yourself." After the appointment, Victoria sat in her car for 20 minutes, not starting the engine. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. You don't have to make it alone. But she did. That was the price of the life she'd chosen. At Hale Industries, the weekly executive meeting was in full swing. Victoria sat at the head of the conference table, reviewing the quarterly projections with her usual precision. "The infrastructure modernization is on track," she noted, scanning the report. "Daniel Reed's team has exceeded expectations." Across the table, her CFO nodded. "Reed's reliable, always has been." Something in his tone made Victoria glance up sharply, but his expression revealed nothing. She was being paranoid. No one knew. No one could know. "We should consider him for the director position when it opens," another executive suggested. "He's been passed over before, but his recent work shows leadership potential." Victoria kept her face neutral even as her heart rate spiked. "Let's review all qualified candidates when the time comes. Reed's competent, but we shouldn't rush into promotions." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. She'd just potentially damaged Daniel's career because of her own panic. But if she showed favoritism now, when she was carrying his child— Actually, she corrected carefully, "You're right. Reed deserves consideration. Put together a formal review of his qualifications." The meeting moved on, but Victoria barely registered the rest of it. She was making mistakes, letting her personal crisis bleed into professional decisions. This was exactly what she'd always feared about relationships, about vulnerability. It compromised everything. But that afternoon, Daniel's phone rang just as he was leaving to pick up Emma. "Reed speaking." "Mr. Reed, this is Patricia from Ms. Hale's office. She'd like to see you at 4:30 regarding the infrastructure project." Daniel glanced at his watch. 4:15. "Today? I have to pick up my daughter in 30 minutes. She said it would be brief." He hesitated, then texted his mother to grab Emma from gymnastics. "I'll be there." 10 minutes later, he stood outside Victoria's office, straightening his tie and wondering why his pulse was racing. This was work, just work. Patricia waved him in. Victoria stood by her windows, her back to him, silhouette sharp against the city skyline. "You wanted to see me?" he asked. She turned, and for just a moment her professional mask slipped. She looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Daniel, yes, thank you for making time." The use of his first name surprised him. At work, she always called him Reed or Mr. Reed. "The migration project," she continued, her tone steadying. "The executive team is impressed with your progress. We're considering you for a director position." He blinked, caught off guard. "I appreciate that." You deserve it, she said. Your work has been exceptional. An awkward silence fell between them. Daniel felt the weight of everything unspoken. That night, the distant since, the careful way they'd both pretended it meant nothing. Is that all? He asked finally. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, then away. Yes, that's all. Thank you for coming up. He nodded, turning to leave. But something made him stop at the door. Victoria. Ms. Hale, she corrected automatically. Ms. Hale, he amended, though the formality felt wrong. If you ever need anything, if something's wrong, why would something be wrong? You just seem... He trailed off, not sure how to finish. Tired? Vulnerable? Human? I'm fine, she said firmly. Everything's fine. It was so obviously a lie that Daniel almost challenged it, but she was his boss and he had no right to push. Okay, he said quietly. But the offer stands. After he left, Victoria sank into her chair, her heart pounding. He'd noticed. Of course he'd noticed. Daniel Reed noticed everything. It was part of what made him good at his job and part of what had drawn her to him that night. He'd looked at her and seen her. Not the CEO, not the quarterly reports, just her. And she'd sent him away with a lie. But 2 weeks later, Victoria sat in her office after hours, staring at a document she'd drafted and deleted 17 times. A letter to Daniel, explaining everything. Each version felt wrong, too cold, too emotional, too presumptuous. She was 16 weeks pregnant now. Her body was changing in ways she couldn't hide much longer. This morning, she'd had to wear a looser blazer, and Patricia had definitely noticed. The decision about the pregnancy had made itself somewhere along the way. She was keeping the baby, not because of any dramatic revelation, but because every time she'd tried to imagine another choice, her body had rebelled against it. But keeping the baby meant telling Daniel. He had a right to know. Even if it complicated everything, even if it destroyed the fragile professional relationship they'd maintained. Victoria's phone rang, her private line, the one only a few people had. Victoria Hale. Ms. Hale, this is Dr. Morrison. I have your latest test results. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. And? Everything looks good. The baby's healthy. Measurements are right on track. But I do want to discuss your stress levels. Your blood pressure is elevated, and given your age and risk factors, I'll work on it, Victoria interrupted. Victoria, I'm serious. Chronic stress in pregnancy can lead to complications. You need to find ways to reduce your workload, to let people help you. After the call ended, Victoria stood and moved to her window. 43 floors below, people streamed out of the building, heading home to their normal lives, lives where mistakes didn't upend everything. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkening glass, a woman who'd built an empire on control, on never showing weakness. But soon, very soon, her body would show what she'd been hiding, and then there would be no more control, no more secrets, just truth, messy and inconvenient and unavoidable. She picked up her phone and typed a message before she could overthink it. Daniel, we need to talk. Not about work. Can you meet me tomorrow night? Somewhere private. Her finger hovered over the send button for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then she hit send and waited for her carefully constructed world to begin its collapse. Daniel was helping Emma with her math homework when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. Victoria. A text message. The first personal contact since that night. We need to talk. Not about work. Can you meet me tomorrow night? Somewhere private? Emma tugged his sleeve. Dad, you said 7 times 3 is 21. Right. Sorry, sweetie. He set the phone down, but his mind raced. What did she want? After 3 months of careful distance, why now? Unless something was wrong. He thought of how she'd looked in her office 2 weeks ago, exhausted, her hand moving to her stomach in a gesture that had seemed unconscious. His pulse quickened. No, he was reading too much into it. This was probably about work, despite what she'd said. Maybe about the promotion, maybe about maintaining boundaries. But the word private suggested otherwise. After Emma went to bed, Daniel sat in his kitchen, staring at his phone. Finally, he typed a response. Tomorrow works. Where and when? The answer came almost immediately. My place. 8 o'clock. I'll send you the address. Her place. Not a restaurant, not neutral ground. Her home. Daniel set down his phone and pressed his palms against his eyes. Tomorrow night, everything would change. He could feel it in his bones. He just didn't know how yet. The next evening, Victoria stood in her penthouse apartment, second-guessing everything. She'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on casual pants and a loose sweater that hid her growing belly. The apartment was impeccable as always, modern furniture, art she'd collected over years, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything in its place, everything controlled, except her. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Victoria took a breath, smoothing her sweater, then opened the door. Daniel stood in the hallway, still in his work clothes, his expression guarded but concerned. Hi. Thank you for coming, she said, stepping back to let him in. He entered slowly, taking in the space. Nice place. Would you like something to drink? Water? Coffee? Water's fine. She moved to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with her hands. Daniel remained in the living room, his discomfort evident. You can sit, she said, returning with 2 glasses of water. He settled on the edge of the couch, and she took the chair across from him. Professional distance, even now. Victoria, what's going on? He asked directly. You've been avoiding me for months, and now I'm pregnant. The words came out harder than she'd planned, without preamble or softening. Daniel's face went blank with shock. The water glass in his hand trembled slightly. You're... He stopped, started again. How far along? 16 weeks. She watched him do the math, saw the moment he understood. Is it mine? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. The silence that followed felt infinite. Daniel set down his water glass carefully, as if afraid he might shatter it. You're sure? There's been no one else, she said quietly. Not in over a year. Just you. He stood abruptly, pacing to the windows, his back to her. Victoria waited, her heart hammering. 16 weeks, he finally said. You've known for how long? 6 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. He turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. And what do you want to do? I'm keeping it, she said. The baby. I've decided. Okay. He nodded slowly, processing. Okay. And you're telling me because you have a right to know, because it's your child too. What do you want from me? The question wasn't defensive, just genuine. Do you want me involved? Do you want money? What? Victoria stood, needing to meet him at eye level. I don't want anything. I can provide for the baby. I have resources, support systems. I'm telling you because it's the right thing to do, not because I expect anything. That's not how this works, Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. If you're having my child, I'm involved. That's not negotiable. I'm not asking you to... I know you're not asking, he interrupted. That's part of the problem. You never ask for anything. You just handle everything alone, like needing help is a weakness. The words hit harder than Victoria expected. That's not fair. Isn't it? Daniel challenged. You waited 6 weeks to tell me. 6 weeks where you dealt with this alone because... What? You were afraid I'd try to control the decision? That I'd make demands? I don't know you well enough to know what you'd do, she shot back. We spent one night together, Daniel. We're not in a relationship. We're barely colleagues. We're about to be parents, he said quietly. That's more than colleagues. The truth of it settled between them like a third presence in the room. Victoria sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, Daniel admitted, returning to the couch. But we figure it out, together. I can't let this affect your career, she said, or your daughter. Emma shouldn't have to deal with... Let me worry about Emma, Daniel said firmly. She's my responsibility. And as for my career, I'm good at my job. That stands on its own. People will talk. They'll say you slept your way to the director position. Let them talk. His calm certainty unsettled her more than anger would have. You don't understand what you're saying, the scrutiny, the assumptions. I understand perfectly, Daniel interrupted. I've been a widowed single father in a competitive industry for 4 years. People always assume the worst. I stopped caring what they think a long time ago. Victoria studied him, this man she'd shared one perfect night with and barely knew beyond project reports. Why are you being so calm about this? Because falling apart doesn't help, he said simply, and because he paused, choosing his words carefully. That night meant something to me. I know it was supposed to be casual, but it wasn't. Not for me. Her breath caught. Daniel, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm just being honest. You said honesty, right? So here it is. I think about that night all the time. I think about you, and now we're having a baby. And yeah, it's terrifying and complicated and probably a disaster professionally, but I'm not sorry. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Pregnancy hormones, she told herself, though she knew it was more than that. I'm scared, she admitted, the words foreign on her tongue. Good, Daniel said. That means you're taking it seriously. I don't know how to not be in control. Then learn, he suggested gently. We both learn. Together. The word together hung in the air between them, full of possibility and terror. What do we do now? Victoria asked. Now? Daniel glanced at his watch. Now I need to get home to Emma. My mom's watching her, but I try not to be out late on school nights. The mundane reality of it, his daughter waiting, his mother babysitting, made everything suddenly more real. But tomorrow, Daniel continued, we start making actual plans. Doctor appointments, telling work, figuring out logistics, all of it. You want to come to doctor appointments? He looked at her like she'd said something absurd. Of course I do. This is my child too. Victoria nodded, overwhelmed. Okay, we'll figure it out. Daniel stood, and she walked him to the door. In the threshold, he paused. Victoria, one more thing. Yes? Stop trying to protect me from this. I'm not fragile, and I'm not going to disappear when things get hard. I'm in this. All the way. After he left, Victoria stood in her empty apartment, one hand pressed against her belly where a baby, their baby, was growing. For the first time in 6 weeks, she didn't feel quite so alone. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure if that terrified her or gave her hope. The story continues with more complexity, more truth, and more courage than either of them expected. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you don't have to be strong alone. The morning after Daniel left her apartment, Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the immediate surge of nausea that had become her new routine. She barely made it to the bathroom before her stomach rebelled, leaving her kneeling on the cold tile floor, wondering how something so small could make her feel so powerless. When the wave passed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, hair disheveled, face pale, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. This was Victoria Hale, the woman who'd once negotiated a merger while recovering from food poisoning, who'd given a keynote speech with a fractured rib. But pregnancy was proving to be an opponent she couldn't outsmart or outlast. Her phone buzzed from the bedroom. She found 3 messages waiting. The first was from Daniel, sent at 6:30 that morning. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? The second, sent 10 minutes later. Sorry if that's too intrusive, just checking in. The third, 5 minutes after that. I'm overthinking this, aren't I? Despite everything, Victoria smiled. She typed back, I'm fine, and yes, you're overthinking, but it's actually kind of reassuring. His response came immediately. Emma has a half day today. Could we talk? Maybe grab lunch? Victoria glanced at her calendar, mentally rearranging the afternoon she'd blocked for quarterly reports. Noon works. Where? Somewhere quiet? Away from the office? They settled on a small cafe across town, the kind of place where tech executives rarely ventured. Victoria spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation ahead. What did they really know about each other beyond one night and 16 weeks of biology? At 11:45, she told Patricia she had an off-site meeting and slipped out through the parking garage to avoid questions. The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a yoga studio. Its windows steamed from the lunch rush. Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 menus. He stood when she approached, and for a moment they both hesitated, unsure of the appropriate greeting. Hey, he said finally. Hi. She slid into the seat across from him, grateful it was a booth where her loose blazer wouldn't draw attention. A waitress appeared, and Victoria ordered tea and toast, the only things that seemed safe lately. Daniel got a sandwich, then waited until they were alone before speaking. I've been thinking about what we talked about last night, he began, about how to handle this. And I think we need to start with some ground rules. Victoria nodded, her professional instincts kicking in. Agreed. What did you have in mind? First, we tell work together, not separately, not with you protecting my reputation or me protecting yours. We present a united front. That's going to raise questions, she pointed out, about favoritism, about the timeline of our relationship. There is no relationship, Daniel interrupted gently. Not the way they'll assume. We're two adults who are having a baby together. That's the truth, and we stick to it. They'll want details. They won't get them. Our personal lives are exactly that. Personal. He paused. Unless you want something different, unless you want this to be more than co-parenting. Victoria's heart stuttered. I don't know what I want. This is all happening so fast. Then we keep it simple for now, Daniel said. We're having a baby. We're committed to being good parents. Everything else we figure out as we go. The waitress returned with their orders, giving Victoria a moment to collect herself. When they were alone again, she asked, What about Emma? Have you thought about how to tell her? Daniel's expression softened at his daughter's name. I have, but I wanted to talk to you first. She's going to have questions, lots of them, and she's smart enough to understand the implications. How do you think she'll react? Honestly, I think she'll be excited at first. She's been asking for a sibling since she was 5. He smiled ruefully. Of course, she imagined it happening differently. So did I, Victoria admitted. I never thought I'd be here, pregnant, unmarried, with someone I barely know. You know me better than you think, Daniel said quietly. You knew I was safe that night. You knew I'd respect your boundaries. You wouldn't have trusted me otherwise. She wanted to argue, but he was right. Some instinct had told her Daniel Reed was different, that she could let her guard down without it being used against her. Tell me about Emma, she said, changing the subject slightly. What should I know about her? Daniel's whole demeanor shifted, the proud father emerging. She's 7, but she thinks she's 17. Smart as hell, stubborn as they come. She loves gymnastics, hates math, and has more opinions than should be legally allowed for someone her size. She sounds like she takes after you. She takes after her mother, he corrected, something wistful crossing his face. Sarah was brilliant, sharp-tongued, fiercely independent, terrible at asking for help. He paused. Actually, she sounds a lot like you. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. Do you miss her? Every day, Daniel admitted. But it's different now. The grief isn't as sharp. Emma needs me present, not stuck in the past. How did you do it? Rebuild after losing her? He considered the question, stirring his coffee absently. I didn't have a choice. Emma was 2 years old, and she needed her father. So I figured it out. Found a good daycare, learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, burned a lot of dinners. He smiled. You adapt because you have to. I'm not good at adapting, Victoria confessed. I'm good at controlling, at planning, at managing outcomes. But this, she gestured vaguely at her stomach, this isn't something I can manage into submission. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. But you're stronger than you think. You built a company from almost nothing. You survived an industry designed to push women out. You can handle this too. That was different. That was professional. So is parenting in its own way. It requires strategy, patience, the ability to pivot when things don't go as planned. He leaned forward. And you won't be doing it alone. That's the whole point. Victoria felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Why are you being so kind about this? I turned your life upside down. We turned each other's lives upside down, he corrected. And I'm being kind because you deserve kindness. Because we're in this together, and blame doesn't help anything. She blinked back tears, hormones making everything feel more intense. I'm not usually this emotional. You're pregnant. You're allowed. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Victoria asked, So what's our timeline? For telling work, for making this public? How long can you hide it? Maybe another month. After that, it'll be obvious. Then we tell work in 2 weeks, Daniel suggested. Give ourselves time to prepare, but not so long that someone figures it out first. And Emma? This weekend. I want her to hear it from me before anyone else. He hesitated. Would you want to be there? When I tell her? Victoria's immediate instinct was to refuse. Meeting his daughter felt too intimate, too much like playing family. But she caught herself. If they were doing this, if they were really co-parenting, she needed to stop running from the hard parts. If you think it would help, she said carefully. I think it would help me, Daniel admitted. And I think Emma should meet you before she starts imagining all kinds of scenarios. What if she doesn't like me? She will. Emma's good with people. He paused. But fair warning, she'll ask a million questions, and she's weirdly perceptive about when adults are lying. Great. No pressure. Daniel smiled, and Victoria found herself smiling back despite her anxiety. There was something steadying about him, something that made the impossible feel merely difficult. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about her 2 o'clock meeting. I should get back. Me too. Emma gets out at 1:30. He stood, then hesitated. Victoria? Thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy. Thank you for not making it harder than it had to be. As she drove back to the office, Victoria felt something shift inside her. Not relief exactly, but maybe the beginning of acceptance. She was having a baby with Daniel Reed. They would figure out how to make it work. They didn't have another choice. The rest of the week passed in a strange blur. At work, Victoria maintained her usual efficiency, but everything felt different now that Daniel knew. She caught herself watching for him in meetings, noticing when he entered the building in the mornings, aware of his presence in a way she hadn't been before. He'd started texting her daily. Nothing invasive, just simple check-ins. How are you feeling? Did you eat lunch? Reminder, doctor's appointment tomorrow at 10. It was oddly domestic, and Victoria didn't quite know what to do with it. She'd spent so long being self-sufficient that accepting even basic concern felt foreign. On Friday afternoon, Patricia buzzed her intercom. Ms. Hale, there's someone here to see you. He says it's personal. Victoria's stomach clenched. Who is it? Daniel Reed. She took a breath, smoothing her jacket. Send him in. Daniel entered looking slightly sheepish, carrying a small white bag. Sorry to just show up, but I was in the building and I thought... He held up the bag. Ginger cookies. My mom swore by them when she was pregnant with my sister. Victoria stared at the bag, then at him. You brought me cookies? I know it's probably weird, but you mentioned the nausea is worse in the afternoons, and these actually help. They're not just an old wives' tale. He set the bag on her desk, suddenly awkward. Anyway, I should go. I just wanted to drop those off. Daniel, wait. He paused at the door. Thank you, she said quietly. Really? His smile was genuine. We're in this together, remember? That includes ginger cookies. After he left, Victoria opened the bag and took out one of the cookies. It was homemade, still slightly warm. She took a small bite, and to her surprise, her stomach settled instead of rebelling. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Everything all right? Fine, Victoria said automatically. Then, because Patricia deserved honesty, actually, I'm going to need you to start moving my afternoon meetings earlier. The nausea is unpredictable. Patricia's eyes widened slightly, but she simply nodded. Of course. Anything else you need? Not yet, but soon, probably in the next few weeks, we'll need to have a longer conversation. I'll be ready whenever you are, Patricia said, and Victoria heard the unspoken understanding in her tone. Saturday arrived faster than Victoria expected. She stood in front of her closet, changing outfits for the third time, trying to find something that said responsible adult without screaming trying too hard. Finally, she settled on casual pants and a simple sweater, approachable but not desperate. Daniel had invited her to his house at 2 in the afternoon. We'll tell Emma together, he'd said. Then maybe you can stay for an early dinner? Nothing fancy, just so she can get to know you a bit. Now, driving through a quiet suburban neighborhood, Victoria felt her anxiety spike. This was Daniel's world, tree-lined streets, houses with yards, children playing on sidewalks. so different from her sterile high-rise existence. His house was a modest two-story with blue shutters and a small garden. Emma's bike leaned against the porch, pink streamers hanging from the handlebars. Victoria parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. The front door opened before she could knock. Daniel stood there in jeans and a worn university sweatshirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him at work. "You came," he said, as if there'd been doubt. "I said I would." "I know, He stepped back. "Come in. Emma's in the living room. She thinks you're just a friend from work who's joining us for dinner." The house was warm and lived in, with Emma's artwork on the walls and family photos clustered on shelves. Victoria caught a glimpse of Daniel with a beautiful woman holding a newborn. Sarah, she realized, his late wife. "Emma, our guest is here," Daniel called out. A small girl bounded into the hallway, all energy and wild curls. She stopped when she saw Victoria, studying her with intense brown eyes. "You're really tall," Emma announced. "Emma," Daniel said warningly. "What?" "She is." Emma tilted her head. "Are you Dad's boss?" "I am," Victoria confirmed, crouching down to Emma's level despite the slight protest from her back. "I'm Victoria. It's nice to meet you." "I'm Emma. I'm 7 3/4, and I can do a backflip on the trampoline." She paused. "Can you do a backflip?" "No, I definitely cannot." "That's okay. Most grown-ups can't." Emma turned to Daniel. "Can we show her the backyard before dinner?" "Actually, sweetie, I need to talk to you first." "Why don't we sit down?" They moved to the living room, and Victoria perched on the edge of the couch while Emma flopped into an oversized armchair. Daniel sat beside Victoria, close enough that she could feel his steadying presence. "So here's the thing, Em," Daniel began, his tone gentle but direct. "You know how you've been asking about having a brother or sister?" Emma's eyes went wide. "You're getting me a sibling?" "Kind of," Daniel said carefully. "Victoria and we're going to have a baby. In about 5 months, you're going to have a little brother or sister." Emma looked between them, processing. "But you're not married." "No, we're not," Daniel confirmed. "We're friends who are having a baby together." "Like Sophie's mom and dad," Emma said thoughtfully. "They live in different houses, but both take care of Sophie." "Similar to that," Daniel agreed, clearly relieved by her reference point. Emma turned her sharp gaze to Victoria. "Are you going to live here?" "No, I'll have my own place, but your dad and I will both take care of the baby." "Will the baby be here sometimes and at your place sometimes?" "We haven't figured out all the details yet," Victoria admitted. "But yes, probably something like that." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious. Then she asked, "Does this mean you're my dad's girlfriend?" Victoria felt Daniel tense beside her. "We're figuring that out too," he said honestly. "Right now, we're focused on being good parents." "But you like each other, right? You wouldn't have a baby with someone you didn't like." The child's logic was irrefutable. Victoria glanced at Daniel, who looked equally caught off guard. "We do like each other," Victoria said carefully. "Your dad is a good person." "And you're pretty," Emma offered. "And you smell nice." Despite her nerves, Victoria smiled. "Thank you." Emma hopped out of her chair and approached Victoria with the fearlessness of childhood. "Can I feel your stomach? My friend Mia's mom was pregnant, and we could feel the baby kick." "The baby's still too small to kick," Victoria explained, "but when it's bigger, maybe." "How big is it now?" "About the size of an avocado," Daniel supplied, clearly having done his research. Emma giggled. "That's so weird, a baby avocado." She tilted her head. "Are you scared?" The question caught Victoria off guard with its directness. "Yes," she admitted. "A little bit." "That's okay," Emma said wisely. "My dad was scared when my mom died, but he figured it out. He'll help you figure it out too." Victoria felt her throat tighten. This child, who'd lost her mother so young, was trying to reassure her. "Thank you, Emma. That's very kind." "Are you staying for dinner?" Emma asked, already moving on with the quick transitions of childhood. "If that's still okay." "Dad's making spaghetti. It's not as good as Grandma's, but it's pretty good." Emma turned to Daniel. "Can Victoria help me with my art project after dinner?" "If she wants to," Daniel said, shooting Victoria an apologetic look. I'd love to, Victoria heard herself say. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Daniel's spaghetti was indeed pretty good, and Emma kept up a steady stream of conversation about school, gymnastics, and her best friend Lily's upcoming birthday party. Victoria found herself relaxing, drawn into the rhythm of their family dinner. After they ate, Emma dragged Victoria to the dining room table where her art supplies were spread out. We're making posters for Earth Day at school. I'm doing mine about ocean animals. For the next hour, Victoria helped glue pictures of whales and dolphins, while Emma narrated facts she'd learned about marine conservation. Daniel cleaned up from dinner, occasionally checking in with a smile that suggested he was pleased by how well things were going. You're good at this, Emma declared, examining their finished poster. Better than Dad. He always uses too much glue. I heard that, Daniel called from the kitchen. Emma giggled conspiratorially. It's true, though. As the evening wound down, Emma started yawning despite her best efforts to stay awake. Daniel scooped her up. Time for bed, kiddo. But Victoria just got here, Emma protested. Victoria can come back another time, Daniel assured her. Emma twisted in his arms to look at Victoria. Will you? Come back? If you'd like me to, Victoria said. I would. And maybe next time you can tell me about being a boss. That sounds cool. After Daniel carried Emma upstairs for her bedtime routine, Victoria stood in the living room, feeling oddly emotional. She studied the photos on the walls. Daniel and Emma at various ages, Sarah's presence still tangible in the family narrative. This was what she was joining, not just Daniel, but his whole life. His daughter, his history, his grief, and his resilience. Daniel returned 20 minutes later, looking tired but content. Sorry that took so long. She had about 1 million follow-up questions. It's fine. She's wonderful, Daniel. She likes you, he said. That's not always a given. Emma's pretty choosy about people. I was terrified, Victoria admitted. I've negotiated with venture capitalists and hostile board members, but a 7-year-old had me completely out of my depth. Daniel laughed. You did great. The art project was inspired. She'll remember that. They stood in the quiet living room, the evening's unexpected success settling around them. I should go, Victoria said, though she found herself reluctant to leave the warmth of this house. Probably, Daniel agreed. But he didn't move toward the door. Daniel, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret it? That night? He considered the question seriously. No, not even with how complicated everything's become. Do you? I don't know, she said honestly. I regret not being more careful. I regret the mess it's created. But the night itself, she paused. No, I don't regret that. Then we have something to build on, Daniel said simply. At the door, he caught her hand. We're going to be okay, all of us. Victoria squeezed his hand briefly before letting go. I hope you're right. Driving home through the dark suburban streets, Victoria felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Maybe this impossible situation wasn't a disaster. Maybe, somehow, they'd find a way to make it work. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Emma wants to know if you like chocolate chip cookies. Apparently we're baking tomorrow. Victoria smiled, typing back, I love chocolate chip cookies. Good, because you're invited. 2:00. Bring an apron. For the first time since she'd seen those 2 pink lines, Victoria let herself imagine a future that wasn't just survival, but something warmer, something that looked surprisingly like family, even if it didn't fit any conventional definition. Monday morning arrived with the crushing weight of reality. Victoria sat in her office, staring at the HR guidelines she'd written herself years ago about workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. Every word now felt like an indictment. Patricia buzzed her intercom. Ms. Hale, you have the executive meeting in 10 minutes. Cancel it, Victoria said abruptly. Cancel the executive meeting? Reschedule for this afternoon, and ask Daniel Reed to come to my office. Tell him it's urgent. 20 minutes later, Daniel appeared, concern evident in his expression. What's wrong? Is it the baby? No, well, yes, sort of. Victoria stood, pacing to her windows. I've been thinking about how we tell work, and I think we need to do it now. Today. Today? I thought we agreed on 2 weeks. I can't wait 2 weeks. Every day we hide, this is another day we're violating company policy. Another day someone could find out accidentally and use it against us. She turned to face him. We need to control the narrative before someone else does. Daniel studied her carefully. What brought this on? Reality, she said flatly. I wrote these policies, Daniel. I know exactly what they say about relationships between executives and subordinates, and right now we're in violation. We're not in a relationship. Try explaining that nuance to HR. He moved closer, his voice lowering. So what do you want to do? Walk into the boardroom and announce you're pregnant? Yes, essentially. She pulled out a document she'd drafted over the weekend. I've prepared a statement. We present it together to the board, then to the executive team, then company-wide. Clear, direct, no room for speculation. Daniel took the document, reading it quickly. This is very thorough. I've had practice with crisis management. Victoria, this isn't a crisis, it's a baby. It's both, she countered, and I need to handle it before I lose control of the situation entirely. He set down the document, his expression serious. Okay, if you're sure this is what you want, I'm with you, but we do it my way. Your way. We don't treat this like damage control. We present it as what it is, two colleagues who are having a baby together and who are committed to maintaining professional standards. He paused. And we don't apologize. We didn't do anything wrong. Victoria wanted to argue, but she recognized the truth in his words. All right, your way. When? This afternoon. Give me 2 hours to prepare, then we face the board together. As Daniel left her office, Victoria felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came before major decisions. This was it. The moment where everything became real and irreversible. She pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling the slight swell that would soon be impossible to hide. We're doing this, she whispered to the baby growing inside her. Ready or not? 2 hours felt like both an eternity and no time at all. Victoria spent them reviewing the statement she'd drafted, then revising it based on Daniel's feedback, then revising it again until the words blurred together. By the time Patricia buzzed to announce the board had assembled, her hands were shaking. She found Daniel waiting outside the boardroom, looking far calmer than she felt. He'd changed into a fresh shirt and tie, projecting the quiet competence that had first caught her attention months ago. Ready? He asked. No, but let's do it anyway. He opened the door, and they entered together. The 7 board members looked up in surprise. Victoria rarely called emergency meetings, and Daniel's presence at board level was unusual. Thank you all for making time on short notice, Victoria began, remaining standing while Daniel took a position beside her. We have something important to share that affects both company policy and personnel matters. Richard Chen, the longest-serving board member, leaned forward. This sounds serious. It is, Victoria confirmed. She took a breath, feeling Daniel's steadying presence beside her. I'm pregnant. The father is Daniel Reed, who currently serves as senior project manager in our infrastructure division. We're here to inform you directly and to address any concerns about conflicts of interest or company policy. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria watched the board members' faces cycle through shock, calculation, and in some cases, poorly concealed disapproval. Margaret Stone, the board's only other woman, spoke first. How far along are you? 17 weeks. And the nature of your relationship with Mr. Reed? Richard asked, his tone carefully neutral. We're colleagues who are expecting a child together, Daniel answered before Victoria could respond. We're committed to co-parenting and to maintaining the highest professional standards. That's quite a diplomatic answer, another board member, James Wu, observed. But it doesn't clarify the situation. Are you in a romantic relationship or not? Victoria felt heat creep up her neck, but Daniel's voice remained steady. With respect, that's a personal question. What matters professionally is that we're prepared to manage any potential conflicts of interest. You're her subordinate, James pointed out. That's already a conflict of interest. Which is why I'm proposing an immediate organizational change, Victoria interjected. Daniel will report directly to the COO rather than through my chain of command. Additionally, I'll recuse myself from any decisions regarding his compensation, promotion, or performance reviews. Margaret studied them both. When did this relationship begin? There is no relationship in the way you're implying, Victoria said firmly. We spent one evening together 3 months ago. We've maintained professional boundaries since then. Except for the baby, James muttered. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. We're here out of respect for this board and this company. We could have hidden this for several more months, but we chose transparency. I'd appreciate the same respect in return. Richard held up a hand. Let's keep this professional. Victoria, you understand this puts the company in a difficult position. There will be questions about favoritism, about judgment. I understand completely, Victoria interrupted. Which is why I'm also prepared to temporarily step back from certain responsibilities during the later stages of my pregnancy. I've drafted a comprehensive transition plan that ensures continuity of leadership. She slid copies of the document across the table. The board members began reading, and Victoria felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was her company, built from her uncle's failing legacy into something that mattered, and now she was watching them evaluate whether she was still fit to lead it. This is very thorough, Margaret said after several minutes. You've clearly thought this through. I've thought about little else for the past month, Victoria admitted. Richard set down the document. I appreciate your transparency, Victoria, and Mr. Reed, your willingness to participate in this conversation speaks well of your character. He paused. However, I'm sure you both understand this will require further discussion. We'll need to consult with legal, with HR, potentially with our PR team. Of course, Victoria agreed. I'm available to answer any questions. One more thing, James said, his expression skeptical. How do we know this won't happen again? That you won't develop another inappropriate relationship with another employee? The question landed like a slap. Before Victoria could respond, Daniel stepped forward. With respect, Mr. Wu, that question is out of line. Miss Hale's personal life is her own business. What happened between us doesn't reflect a pattern of inappropriate behavior. It reflects two adults making a private choice that happened to have professional implications. His tone was ice cold now. If you're suggesting she lacks the judgment to lead this company, I'd be happy to provide a detailed account of every project she's successfully managed, every crisis she's navigated, every competitor she's outmaneuvered. Her track record speaks for itself. Victoria stared at him, stunned. She'd expected to defend herself, not to have Daniel do it for her. Margaret was smiling slightly. Mr. Reed makes a valid point. Victoria's leadership has been exemplary. One personal situation doesn't negate 7 years of extraordinary results. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with the board asking questions about logistics, timeline, and potential impacts on company operations. Victoria answered each one with precision, while Daniel provided calm support, speaking only when directly addressed. Finally, Richard stood. Thank you both for your candor. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss next steps. In the meantime, I trust you'll both continue to maintain the professionalism you've demonstrated today. As they left the boardroom, Victoria felt her legs trembling. She made it to her office before the adrenaline crash hit, sinking into her chair with her head in her hands. Daniel closed the door behind them. You okay? You defended me, she said, looking up at him. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. James was out of line, and someone needed to say it. You realize you might have just torpedoed your own career. Speaking to a board member like that, I spoke the truth, Daniel said simply. And if that cost me my career, then it wasn't worth having. Victoria stood, crossing to where he stood by the door. Thank you. Really. I've spent so long fighting my own battles that I forgot what it feels like to have someone in my corner. Get used to it, he said. We're a team now, whether you like it or not. Before she could second-guess herself, Victoria reached out and squeezed his hand. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental, an acknowledgement that maybe she didn't have to face everything alone. Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Hale? The executive team has assembled as you requested. Victoria and Daniel exchanged a look. Round 2, she said. Round 2, he confirmed. The executive meeting was somehow worse than the board. These were Victoria's direct reports, people she'd hired and mentored, and their reactions ranged from shocked to hurt that she hadn't confided in them earlier. How long have you been hiding this? Asked Sarah Chen, the CFO, and someone Victoria considered a friend. I wasn't hiding it. I was processing it, Victoria corrected. I found out 6 weeks ago. I told Daniel 4 weeks ago, and I'm telling all of you now. 4 weeks, Sarah repeated. You've been dealing with this for a month and didn't say anything. I needed time to figure out my own feelings before managing everyone else's, Victoria said, hearing the defensive edge in her voice. Marcus Okafor, the COO, looked between Victoria and Daniel. I have to ask, and I apologize in advance for the directness, but is this a relationship that predates the pregnancy? Or are you two just figuring things out now? We're figuring it out now, Daniel answered. We're committed to co-parenting. Everything else is still being determined. That's going to be complicated, Marcus observed. For you personally, and for the company dynamics. We're aware, Victoria said, which is why we're implementing the organizational changes I outlined. Daniel will report to you, Marcus. I'll step back from any decisions that could be perceived as favoritism. The discussion continued, more supportive than the board meeting, but still full of concerns about optics, about maintaining team morale, about how this would affect Victoria's leadership credibility. By the time the meeting ended, Victoria felt wrung out. She'd faced hostile negotiations that had been less exhausting than the past 3 hours. Daniel waited until the room cleared before speaking. You need to eat something. You've been running on adrenaline and coffee since this morning. I'm not hungry. That doesn't matter. The baby needs nutrition even if you don't feel like eating. He pulled out his phone. There's a sandwich place 2 blocks away. I'm ordering you turkey on wheat with extra vegetables. No arguments. You're very bossy, Victoria observed, but there was no heat in it. Someone has to be. You're terrible at taking care of yourself. He finished placing the order, then looked at her seriously. How are you really doing? And don't give me the corporate answer. Victoria sank back into her chair, the professional mask finally slipping. I'm terrified. I just told the people who control my career that I'm pregnant by a subordinate. I watched them judge whether I'm still capable of leading the company I built. And tomorrow we have to tell the entire company, and the press will inevitably find out, and you'll handle it, Daniel interrupted gently, the same way you handle everything else, one step at a time. What if I can't? What if this is too much? He pulled up a chair beside her. Then you lean on me. That's the whole point of doing this together. I don't know how to lean on people. So learn, he said, echoing the words from their first real conversation about the pregnancy. We're both learning as we go. The food arrived and Daniel was right. Once she started eating, Victoria realized how hungry she actually was. They sat in her office as the sun set over the city, eating sandwiches and discussing strategy for the company-wide announcement tomorrow. We should do it in the morning, Daniel suggested. Get it out early so people have the whole day to process. And so we can deal with the fallout immediately, rather than letting it fester overnight, Victoria added. Exactly. He paused. Emma asked about you this morning, wanted to know when you're coming back to visit. The subject change caught Victoria off guard. She did? She's already planning what you'll do together. Apparently there's a movie she wants to show you, and she needs your opinion on her science fair project. He smiled. Fair warning, she gets attached quickly. Is that a problem? Not if you're planning to stick around, but if you're going to be in and out of her life, I need to know now so I can manage her expectations. Victoria understood what he was really asking. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel. I made a commitment to this baby, which means a commitment to you and to Emma. I keep my commitments. Good, he said quietly, because she's already drawn a picture of you to put on the refrigerator. You're stick figure tall, apparently. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. Well, she's not wrong. They fell into silence, the easy kind that didn't require filling. Victoria realized with some surprise that she was comfortable here, sitting in her office after hours with Daniel, discussing their impossible situation without panic or recrimination. Can I ask you something? She ventured. Always. Why aren't you angry? At me, at the situation, at how this has complicated your life? Daniel considered the question carefully. I was, at first. When you told me, my immediate reaction was panic. I thought about Emma, about my career, about all the ways this could go wrong. He met her eyes. But then I realized anger doesn't solve anything. We can't change what happened. We can only decide what we do next. That's very mature of you. I'm a single parent, he said with a slight smile. I learned a long time ago that you can waste energy being angry at circumstances, or you can adapt and move forward. Adaptation's more productive. Victoria thought about that, about the years she'd spent being angry. at her uncle for dying and leaving her with impossible expectations, at the board members who questioned her, at the industry that made her fight twice as hard for half the recognition. All that anger, and where had it gotten her? Successful, yes, but also alone. "I want to try," she said abruptly. "Not just co-parenting, actually trying to build something together. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm probably going to be terrible at it, but I want to try." Daniel's expression softened. "I want that too, but we take it slow, okay? No pressure to figure everything out immediately." "Slow," Victoria agreed, though the concept felt foreign to someone who'd built a career on moving fast and breaking things. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Stone. "Spoke with the board. We're behind you. Tomorrow's announcement will be fine. Have faith." Victoria showed the message to Daniel, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "Well, that's something. See? People are more understanding than you think." "Some people." James Wu looked like he wanted to demand my resignation. "James Wu is a dinosaur who's been waiting for you to fail since you took over," Daniel pointed out. "His opinion doesn't define you." They talked for another hour, planning the announcement, discussing logistics, and occasionally veering into more personal territory. Victoria learned that Daniel hated cilantro, that he'd wanted to be an architect before falling into tech, that Emma had been a surprise pregnancy too, though planned, unlike their current situation. "Sarah and I had been trying for a year," he explained. "We'd started to worry it wouldn't happen. Then suddenly it did, and we were terrified and thrilled in equal measure." His expression grew distant. "I wish she could have seen Emma now. She'd be so proud." "You're raising an amazing kid," Victoria said. "She'd be proud of you too." "I hope so." He glanced at his watch. "I should get going. Emma's with my mom tonight, but I don't like to leave her too late." At the door, he paused. "Victoria, for what it's worth, I think you're going to be a good mother. You already care more than you want to admit." After he left, Victoria sat in the quiet of her office, one hand pressed against her stomach. A good mother. She'd never imagined anyone would say that about her, had never imagined wanting to prove them right. But she did want to prove it. To Daniel, to herself, to this baby who hadn't asked to be part of such a complicated situation. The next morning, Victoria stood in front of the assembled company. Over 300 employees gathered in the main auditorium and hundreds more joining via video conference. Daniel stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Thank you all for coming," Victoria began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm going to be direct because you all deserve honesty from leadership. I'm pregnant. The father is Daniel Reed, who many of you know from the infrastructure team. We're expecting our baby in late May." The reaction was immediate. Whispers, surprised faces, a few people openly staring. Victoria pressed on. "I understand this raises questions about company policy and professional boundaries. Daniel and I are committed to managing any potential conflicts of interest. He'll be reporting to Marcus Okafor going forward, and I'll recuse myself from any personnel decisions regarding him." She paused, making eye contact with various employees. "I also want to be clear that this doesn't change my commitment to this company or to you. I'll continue leading with the same standards you've come to expect." Daniel stepped forward. "I know some of you are surprised, maybe even uncomfortable with this announcement. That's understandable. But Victoria and I are both dedicated to maintaining professionalism and to ensuring this personal situation doesn't impact our work or your experience here." The questions came rapidly after that. Someone asked about maternity leave. Another person wanted to know if there would be organizational changes. A brave soul asked if they were getting married. "We're focused on being good parents and good colleagues," Victoria answered. "Everything else is personal and will remain private." As the meeting dispersed, Victoria felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, assessing, judging, speculating. Some employees offered congratulations. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Sarah Chen pulled her aside. "That took guts," she said quietly. "I'm glad you told us." "You're not upset I didn't confide in you earlier?" "I'm a little hurt," Sarah admitted. "But I understand why you needed time. And for what it's worth, I think you and Daniel will figure this out. You're both too stubborn to fail." Throughout the day, the reactions continued to trickle in. Some supportive, some skeptical, a few openly hostile. Victoria handled each with the same professional courtesy, refusing to apologize or explain beyond what she'd already shared. By 5 o'clock, she was exhausted. She found Daniel in his newly assigned office on the executive floor, Marcus's doing, ensuring he was accessible while maintaining the reporting structure change. "Survived day one," she said from his doorway. He looked up from his computer, managing a tired smile. "Barely. I've had 14 different people stop by to either congratulate me or warn me I'm making a huge mistake."
Which side is winning? Pretty evenly split. He stood, stretching. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better, but also worse." She leaned against the door frame. "Emma's picture arrived on my desk this afternoon." "The stick figure one?" "The very same. Someone from facilities framed it." Victoria felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. "That 7-year-old has more faith in me than most of my executive team." "Emma's a good judge of character," Daniel said. "She doesn't like everyone, but when she does, it's absolute." "I don't want to let her down." "You won't. And even if you make mistakes, which you will, because everyone does, she'll forgive you. Kids are resilient like that."
Victoria's phone buzzed. Her mother, calling for the third time that day. She'd sent a text that morning with the basic facts, trying to head off the inevitable gossip. Her mother's response had been a terse, "We need to talk." "I should take this," she said reluctantly. "Good luck," Daniel offered. And Victoria, "You don't owe anyone an apology for your life choices, not even your mother." The conversation with her mother was exactly as difficult as Victoria had anticipated. Evelyn Hale had strong opinions about propriety, about family reputation, about the proper order of things. A pregnancy outside marriage, with a subordinate no less, violated every one of her carefully maintained standards. "What will people think?" her mother demanded. "The board, the society pages. Victoria, you've made yourself vulnerable to every kind of criticism." "I'm aware, Mother." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've thrown away everything you've built for one reckless moment." Victoria felt anger spike through her exhaustion. "I haven't thrown away anything. I'm still the CEO. The company is still thriving. The only thing that's changed is that I'm having a baby. With someone completely inappropriate. Daniel is a good man. He's smart, capable, and he's committed to being a good father." "He's a middle manager," her mother said dismissively. "What kind of future can he possibly provide?" "He doesn't need to provide anything. I can take care of myself and my child." "Then why involve him at all?" The question struck at something Victoria hadn't fully articulated yet. "Because it's his child too. Because he deserves to be part of this. And because—" She paused, surprised by the truth of what she was about to say. "Because I don't want to do this alone." Her mother was silent for a long moment. "Victoria, you've always been so independent. I've never seen you need anyone." "Maybe that's been the problem," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe I've been so busy proving I didn't need anyone that I forgot what it's like to have someone choose to be there anyway." After the call ended, Victoria sat in her darkening office, watching the city lights flicker on below. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, throwing away everything she'd built, making herself vulnerable, inappropriate choices. But when she thought about Daniel standing beside her in those meetings, defending her to the board, bringing her ginger cookies and checking if she'd eaten, that didn't feel like throwing anything away. It felt like building something new, something she hadn't known she wanted until it started taking shape. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Emma wants to know if you're free for dinner Sunday. She's making you her special mac and cheese, which is regular mac and cheese with hot dogs cut up in it. Fair warning, it's terrible, but she's very proud of it." Victoria smiled, typing back, "I'd love to come. I promise to eat every bite." "You say that now. Wait until you taste it. I'm sure it's wonderful." "You're a terrible liar, but we appreciate the effort." Victoria set down her phone, feeling lighter than she had in days. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new judgments, new complications. But tonight, she had dinner plans with a 7-year-old who believed in her, and a man who'd chosen to stand beside her when walking away would have been easier. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was actually everything. Sunday arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind of bright April morning that made everything feel possible. Victoria stood outside Daniel's house at exactly noon, holding a bouquet of flowers she'd second-guessed 3 times before deciding to keep. Through the front window, she could see Emma bouncing around the kitchen,
her energy visible even from the sidewalk. The door flew open before Victoria could knock. Emma stood there in an apron that was clearly meant for an adult, the hem dragging on the floor. "You came," Emma announced, as if there had been any doubt. "We're making mac and cheese, and I get to do the stirring because Dad says I'm responsible now." "That's a big job," Victoria said seriously, stepping inside. "I know. Last time I stirred too hard and some went on the ceiling." Emma grabbed Victoria's hand, tugging her toward the kitchen. "But that was when I was 6. I'm way more careful now." Daniel stood at the stove, looking harried but amused. "Fair warning, she's been planning this meal since Wednesday. There's a whole menu." "Just mac and cheese, though, right?" Victoria asked hopefully. "And hot dogs," Emma added. "And I made Jell-O yesterday, but it didn't set right, so it's kind of soupy, but it still tastes good." Victoria caught Daniel's eye, and he mouthed sorry over Emma's head. She found herself smiling despite the culinary nightmare clearly ahead. The next hour was chaotic in a way Victoria had never experienced. Emma narrated every step of the cooking process, frequently contradicting Daniel's instructions and insisting on her own techniques. The kitchen grew hot and steamy, and Victoria found herself conscripted into cutting hot dogs into precise circles, while Emma supervised with exacting standards. "They have to be the same size," Emma explained patiently, as if Victoria were the child. "Otherwise, some people get bigger pieces, and that's not fair."
You're absolutely right, Victoria agreed, adjusting her cutting technique. When the mac and cheese was finally assembled, bright orange and studded with hot dog circles, Emma insisted on setting the table herself. She placed Victoria's plate with great ceremony, adding an extra napkin. "Because you're fancy," Emma explained. "Dad said you run a whole company, so you probably use lots of napkins." Daniel covered his laugh with a cough. Victoria bit back her own smile. The meal was exactly as advertised, mediocre at best, with the pasta slightly overcooked and the hot dogs rubbery. But Emma watched Victoria's every bite with such hopeful intensity that Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying it, or at least enjoying Emma's pride in her creation. "This is delicious," Victoria said, meaning it in a way that had nothing to do with the food itself. "Really?" Emma beamed. "Dad says I'm getting better at cooking."
"Last month I made him breakfast, and he only had to scrape a little bit of the eggs off the pan." "That's impressive progress," Victoria said diplomatically. After lunch, Emma dragged them both to the backyard, where her promised trampoline waited. She demonstrated her backflip with fearless enthusiasm, while Daniel stood nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. "Your turn, Victoria," Emma called out. "I don't think that's a good idea right now," Victoria said carefully. "Why not? Are you scared?" Victoria glanced at Daniel, who gave a small shake of his head. They hadn't told Emma about the pregnancy yet. That conversation was planned for later today, after Victoria had spent more time with her. "I'm definitely scared," Victoria admitted. "I'm not as brave as you are." Emma seemed to accept this, returning to her flipping. Daniel moved to stand beside Victoria on the grass. "She's going to be devastated when we tell her about the baby," he said quietly. "Not about the baby itself, but that she can't do trampoline demonstrations for you anymore." "We'll find other activities," Victoria assured him, "ones that don't require aerial acrobatics." "Good luck. Emma's definition of fun is pretty high energy." He paused. "You're really good with her, natural." "I'm terrified the entire time." "That's parenthood in a nutshell," Daniel said. "Constant terror disguised as confidence." After Emma wore herself out on the trampoline, they moved inside for the promised Jell-O, which was indeed more liquid than solid. Emma served it in bowls with spoons, though straws might have been more practical. "I think maybe I added too much water," Emma mused, studying her creation. "Or not enough Jell-O powder. It's hard to remember which." "It's still good," Victoria assured her, though drinking Jell-O was definitely a new experience. As Emma finished her dessert, Daniel caught Victoria's eye. It was time. "Em, come sit with us for a minute," Daniel said, patting the couch. "We need to talk to you about something important." Emma's expression shifted immediately to concern. "Is someone sick? Is Grandma okay?" "Everyone's fine," Daniel assured her quickly. "Remember when we told you about the baby? About how you're going to be a big sister?" "Yeah," Emma said slowly. "Well, Victoria came here today partly to spend time with you, but also so we can all start getting to know each other better," Daniel continued. "Because when the baby comes, We're all going to be a family. A different kind of family than what you're used to, but still a family. Emma looked between them, processing. So Victoria's going to be here a lot? If that's okay with you, Victoria said. I'd like to get to know you better, Emma, and I'd like you to get to know me. Will you be here for my birthday? Emma asked. It's in June. I'm going to be 8. I'd love to be there for your birthday. And will you come to my gymnastics competitions? Dad always comes, but sometimes he has to work, and Grandma gets confused about the schedule. Victoria felt her throat tighten. I'll do my best to be there whenever I can. Emma nodded, satisfied. Then her face grew serious. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you going to marry my dad? The question hung in the air. Victoria felt Daniel tense beside her. We're not getting married right now, Victoria said carefully. We're focused on being good parents and being friends. But you like him, right? Because if you're having a baby together, you should like each other. I do like him, Victoria admitted, feeling exposed under Emma's innocent scrutiny. Your dad is a very good person. And you're nice, Emma offered, even though you're really tall and kind of scary when you first meet you. Daniel choked on a laugh. Emma. What? She is scary. But then she's nice. It's confusing. Victoria found herself laughing too. You know what, Emma? That's probably the most accurate description anyone's ever given of me. Emma seemed pleased by this. So when the baby comes, will it live here or at your house? We're still figuring that out, Daniel said. But the baby will spend time in both places, and you'll get to be a big sister no matter where the baby is. Will I have to share my room? No, sweetheart. The baby will have its own space. Emma considered this, then brightened. Can I help decorate the baby's room? I'm really good at picking colors. My room is purple and yellow because those are the best colors. I think that would be wonderful, Victoria said. We'd love your help. The conversation continued, with Emma asking increasingly specific questions about logistics, baby names, and whether the baby would be a boy or girl. Victoria marveled at the child's ability to accept what adults found complicated, to simply adapt and move forward. I think this is going to be good, Emma announced finally. I've always wanted to be a big sister, and now I get Victoria too, which is like a bonus. After Emma ran off to work on a drawing for the baby's room, Daniel and Victoria sat in the living room, processing what had just happened. That went better than I expected, Daniel said. She's remarkable, Victoria replied. How did you raise such an emotionally intelligent 7-year-old? I have no idea. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping up. He turned to face her. But she's right, about this being good. I think we're actually going to be okay. Victoria wanted to believe him, but as the afternoon wore on and she prepared to leave, anxiety crept back in. Emma's acceptance was wonderful, but it was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The following week brought new challenges. The company rumor mill was in full swing, with speculation about Victoria and Daniel's relationship ranging from reasonable to absurd. Someone started a betting pool on when they'd get married. HR fielded 17 complaints about favoritism, though none could point to actual examples. Victoria handled it the only way she knew how, by working harder, staying later, proving that pregnancy hadn't softened her standards or her dedication. But by Thursday evening, she was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She was packing up to leave when Daniel appeared in her doorway. You're still here, he observed. I could say the same about you. Emma's at a sleepover. I'm using the free evening to catch up on the infrastructure migration documentation. He studied her. You look exhausted. I'm fine. That's what you always say. He came into the office, closing the door behind him. Victoria, you can't keep pushing yourself like this. You're 22 weeks pregnant. You need rest. What I need is for people to stop treating me like I'm fragile, she snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. Sorry, it's been a long week. It has, he agreed, not taking offense, which is why you should go home, take a bath, eat something that isn't from the vending machine, and actually sleep. I have 3 more reports to review. They'll still be there tomorrow. He moved closer, his expression gentle but firm. Victoria, you're not going to prove anything by working yourself into the ground. People who matter know you're capable. The ones who don't aren't worth convincing. She wanted to argue, but the truth was she was bone tired. The baby had started moving in the past week,
gentle flutters that were easier to ignore when she stayed busy, but impossible to miss in quiet moments. Fine, she conceded, but only because I really do want that bath. Good. He picked up her bag, refusing to let her carry it.
Come on, I'll walk you to your car.
In the parking garage, Daniel hesitated before opening her car door. Can I ask you something? Always. When you told Emma you liked me, did you mean it? Or were you just saying what she needed to hear? Victoria's heart rate picked up. Why are you asking? Because I need to know where we stand. We've been so focused on logistics and managing everyone else's reactions that we haven't actually talked about us. If there even is an us. She leaned against her car, suddenly grateful for the support. I don't know how to do this, Daniel. Relationships, vulnerability, letting someone in, it's not something I'm good at. That's not an answer. I know. She took a breath. Yes, I meant it. I do like you. More than I probably should given how complicated everything is. That night we spent together, it wasn't just physical for me. You made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Then why are we still pretending this is just about co-parenting? Daniel asked quietly. Because I'm terrified, Victoria admitted. I'm terrified that if we try for more and it doesn't work, we'll mess everything up. For us, for the baby, for Emma. And if we don't try, we'll never know what we could have had. He stepped closer. I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now, but I am asking you to be honest about what you want. Victoria met his eyes, seeing the same vulnerability she felt reflected back at her. I want to try. I want us to be more than just co-parents, but I need time to figure out how to do that without losing myself in the process. Time I can give you, Daniel said. But Victoria, you're not going to lose yourself. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Letting someone in doesn't make you weak, it just makes you human. Before she could overthink it, Victoria leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, nothing like the passionate night they'd shared months ago. But it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something neither of them could fully define yet. When she pulled back, Daniel was smiling. Was that okay? It was more than okay, he assured her, but now you really do need to go home and rest. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. No, but I play one in this parking garage. He opened her car door. Go, rest. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Driving home through the city streets, Victoria felt something shift inside her. Fear was still there. It probably always would be. But alongside it was hope, fragile and new, that maybe she didn't have to choose between strength and vulnerability, between success and connection. Maybe she could have both. The next morning, Victoria woke to her phone ringing at 6:30. It was her doctor's office. Ms. Hale? This is Dr. Morrison. I need you to come in today. Some of your latest blood work is concerning. Victoria's stomach dropped. What's wrong? Your blood pressure is elevated, and there are some markers that suggest you might be developing preeclampsia. It's likely early stages, but we need to monitor you closely. Preeclampsia? Victoria repeated, her medical knowledge kicking in. High blood pressure, potential organ damage, dangerous for both mother and baby. How serious is it? Right now, manageable. But you need to reduce stress, increase rest, and come in for weekly monitoring. If it progresses, we may need to consider bed rest or even early delivery. After hanging up, Victoria sat in her bed, one hand pressed against her growing belly. The baby kicked, a gentle reminder of what was at stake. She called Daniel, knowing it was early but needing to tell someone. Victoria? Is everything okay? I just got a call from my doctor. She explained the situation, hearing her voice shake despite her best efforts to stay calm. I'm coming over, Daniel said immediately. You don't have to I'm already getting my keys. Don't argue. 20 minutes later, Daniel was sitting on her couch, listening as she repeated everything the doctor had said. What do you need? He asked when she finished. I don't know. The doctor said reduce stress, but I can't just stop working. We're in the middle of quarterly reviews. The product launches next month. Victoria, Daniel interrupted gently, the company will survive without you for a few weeks. Your health and the baby's health won't survive if you keep pushing like this. I can't just step back. People are already questioning my commitment. Let them question. Your priority is staying healthy. He took her hand. And I'm going to help you, starting now. How?
First, you're calling Patricia and clearing your schedule for the rest of the week. Then you're going to that doctor's appointment, and I'm coming with you. After that, we're going to sit down and figure out what you can delegate, what can wait, and what actually requires your attention. Daniel, you can't reorganize my entire schedule. Watch me, he said firmly. You told me you wanted to try, to be more than just co-parents. Well, this is what that looks like. It means letting me help when you're scared. It means trusting me to catch you when you need to step back. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Hormones, stress, or genuine emotion, she couldn't tell anymore. I don't know how to do this. Then we learn together, he said, pulling her close. But you don't do it alone. Not anymore. The doctor's appointment confirmed Dr. Morrison's concerns. Victoria's blood pressure was indeed elevated, and the protein levels in her urine suggested early-stage preeclampsia. We're going to monitor you very closely, Dr. Morrison explained, Daniel sitting beside Victoria, holding her hand. Weekly appointments, blood pressure checks twice daily, strict rest protocols. If this progresses, we may need to consider hospitalization. How early could you deliver the baby if necessary? Victoria asked. We'd prefer to get you to at least 32 weeks, ideally 37. Right now you're at 22 weeks, so we have some time. But that time needs to be spent taking care of yourself. After the appointment, Daniel drove Victoria back to her apartment and refused to leave. I'm working from here today, he announced. And before you argue, I already cleared it with Marcus. He's covering my meetings. Emma needs to be picked up from school. My mom's got her. It's handled. He set up his laptop at her dining table. Now, you're going to lie down, elevate your feet, and actually rest. I'll work out here and check on you periodically. This is ridiculous. I can't just lie in bed all day. You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. Victoria, I watched Sarah ignore warning signs because she thought she could handle everything. I'm not watching you do the same thing. The mention of his late wife silenced Victoria's protests. She hadn't thought about it from that perspective. That Daniel had already lost someone he loved to medical complications. That her stubbornness might be triggering trauma for him. Okay, she said quietly. I'll rest. But you'll tell me if anything urgent comes up at work? I will. Now go. Victoria spent the afternoon in bed, laptop nearby but mostly unused, feeling the baby's increasingly frequent movements. Daniel checked on her every hour, bringing water, snacks, and quiet company. By evening, she had to admit she felt better than she had in weeks. The constant tension in her shoulders had eased, and for the first time in months, she wasn't fighting the urge to close her eyes and sleep. Daniel made them dinner, simple pasta that was infinitely better than his daughter's mac and cheese, and they ate together on her couch, Victoria's feet propped up on pillows. Thank you, she said as they finished. For today. For being here. You don't have to thank me. This is what we do now. He set down his plate. But I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll actually follow the doctor's orders, that you'll ask for help instead of trying to power through, that you'll put the baby first even when it feels like you're letting everyone down. Victoria thought about all the people depending on her, the board, her employees, her mother's expectations. Then she thought about the baby growing inside her, about Emma waiting to be a big sister, about Daniel sitting beside her with fear and hope written across his face. I promise, she said. I'll try. That's all I'm asking. Try. He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into him, accepting the comfort she'd denied herself for so long. They sat there as the sun set over the city. Two people who'd accidentally created a life together now trying to build something intentional from the chaos. It wasn't the family either of them had imagined. Wasn't the neat progression of dating, commitment, marriage, children. But maybe, Victoria thought, as Daniel's hand found hers, it was something better, something built on truth and choice, and the kind of partnership that didn't require permission or convention. Stay tonight, she said suddenly. Just stay. I don't want to be alone. Daniel smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. That night, Victoria fell asleep with Daniel beside her, his hand resting protectively on her belly where their baby grew. And for the first time since seeing those two pink lines, she felt something that resembled peace. Whatever came next, the company gossip, her mother's disapproval, the medical complications, the terrifying responsibility of parenthood, they would face it together. And maybe that was the strongest foundation they could ask for. Morning light filtered through Victoria's bedroom curtains, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then she felt Daniel's arm draped across her waist, his breath warm against her shoulder, and remembered everything. The doctor's appointment, the preeclampsia diagnosis, his insistence on staying. She'd expected to feel trapped or crowded, but instead felt something dangerously close to safe. Daniel stirred behind her, his voice rough with sleep. "What time is it?" "Just after 7, Victoria whispered, checking her phone on the nightstand. "How are you feeling?" "Better than yesterday." She turned to face him, finding his eyes already focused on her with concern. "You can go home, check on Emma, get ready for work." "Emma's fine with my mom, and I'm working from here again today." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You're stuck with me until we get your blood pressure under control." Daniel, you can't put your life on hold because I'm having medical complications." "Watch me," he said simply, echoing his words from the day before. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into an unexpected routine. Daniel worked from Victoria's apartment most days, only going into the office for essential meetings. Emma visited twice, bringing her homework and chattering about school while Victoria rested on the couch. Daniel's mother stopped by with homemade soup, her initial wariness of Victoria melting into genuine warmth when she saw how her son looked at the CEO. "He's different with you," she told Victoria one afternoon while Daniel was on a conference call. "Lighter. I haven't seen him like this since Sarah." Victoria didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded, feeling the weight of comparison and hope in equal measure. The preeclampsia remained stable but present, requiring constant monitoring. Victoria had reluctantly delegated most of her responsibilities, keeping only the strategic decisions that truly required her input. To her surprise, the company didn't collapse. Sarah Chen handled the quarterly reviews flawlessly. Marcus managed the product launch with barely a hiccup. The world kept turning even when Victoria Hale wasn't micromanaging every detail. "Turns out you hired competent people," Daniel observed one evening as they reviewed the latest reports together. "Turns out I'm not as indispensable as I thought," Victoria replied, not sure whether to be relieved or insulted. "You're still essential. You're just learning to trust other people to handle what they're capable of handling." He closed his laptop. "That's not weakness. That's smart leadership." At 28 weeks, Victoria's blood pressure spiked during a routine check, and Dr. Morrison insisted on admitting her to the hospital for observation. Daniel called Emma's school to arrange an early pickup, then drove Victoria to the medical center with a calmness that belied the tension in his jaw. "I'm fine," Victoria said, as he helped her into a wheelchair against her protests. "Humor me," he replied. The hospital room was sterile and impersonal, everything Victoria hated about losing control. Nurses hooked her up to monitors that beeped with every heartbeat, every contraction the baby made. Daniel sat beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers. "You should go get Emma," Victoria said. "She'll be worried if you're late." "My mom's picking her up. We're staying right here." "We?" Emma insisted on coming. "She's in the cafeteria with my mom, negotiating how many cookies constitute dinner." He smiled. "She wanted to see you, make sure you're okay." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "She shouldn't have to worry about this. She's 7 years old." "She's also surprisingly resilient, and she cares about you." He squeezed her hand. "We all do." When Emma burst into the room an hour later, clutching a slightly squashed muffin from the cafeteria, Victoria couldn't help but smile. "I brought you food," Emma announced. "Grandma said hospital food is terrible, so I got you a blueberry muffin. It's a little smashed because I dropped it once, but it's still good." "Thank you, sweetheart," Victoria said, accepting the offering. Emma climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, studying all the monitors with intense curiosity. "Do all these beeps mean the baby's okay?" "They do," Daniel confirmed. "See this line? That's the baby's heartbeat." "It's so fast," Emma marveled. Then she turned to Victoria. "Are you scared?" Victoria considered lying, then remembered Emma's ability to detect dishonesty. "A little bit, yes." "That's okay. My dad says being scared means you're being smart about danger." Emma patted Victoria's hand with the seriousness of someone much older. But you're going to be fine. You're really strong, and Dad won't let anything bad happen to you. Over Emma's head, Victoria met Daniel's eyes and saw the same fear she felt, carefully masked for his daughter's sake. Dr. Morrison arrived as visiting hours ended, shooing everyone out so she could examine Victoria properly. The news was both good and bad. The baby was fine, thriving even, but Victoria's blood pressure remained dangerously elevated. "I want to keep you here for at least 48 hours, Dr. Morrison said. If we can stabilize you, you can go home on strict bed rest. If not, you'll need to stay until delivery." "How early would you deliver?" Victoria asked, doing the mental math. 28 weeks was viable, but risky. "We'd prefer to get you to 32 weeks minimum, ideally 34. Every day matters at this stage." The doctor's expression was kind but firm. "Victoria, I know this isn't what you wanted, but your body is telling you to slow down. You need to listen." After Dr. Morrison left, Victoria lay in the dark hospital room, listening to the monitors beep and feeling the baby's movements. Stronger now, more insistent. She thought about Emma's smashed muffin, about Daniel refusing to leave her side, about the company that was surviving without her constant oversight. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Stone. "Heard you're in the hospital. The board voted unanimously to extend your medical leave as long as necessary. Focus on getting healthy. We've got everything under control here." Victoria stared at the message, something cracking inside her. She'd spent so long believing she had to be perfect, had to prove herself every single day, that accepting help felt like admitting defeat. But maybe that had been the problem all along. Maybe real strength wasn't refusing to bend. It was knowing when to let other people carry some of the weight. She was crying when Daniel returned, having smuggled himself back in after official visiting hours ended. "Hey, what's wrong?" He sat on the edge of the bed, wiping her tears with gentle fingers. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's wrong. I don't know anymore." Victoria hiccuped, frustrated by her inability to articulate the tangle of emotions. "I've spent my entire adult life being in control, and now my own body won't cooperate, and I can't fix it by working harder or being smarter, and I'm terrified I'm going to fail at this before the baby's even born." "You're not failing," Daniel said firmly. "You're dealing with a medical condition that has nothing to do with your worth or capability, and you're doing it while growing an entire human being. That's pretty remarkable." "I don't feel remarkable. I feel weak." "Then your definition of weak needs updating." He shifted closer. "Victoria, you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who's brave enough to ask for help when she needs it. Someone who's learning to trust other people. Someone who's choosing her baby's health over her ego, even though it's killing her to step back from work." "Is that what I'm doing?" Victoria asked, managing a watery smile. "That's exactly what you're doing, and I've never been more proud of you." Victoria pulled him down into a kiss, tasting salt from her own tears. When they broke apart, Daniel was smiling. "What?" she asked. "I love you," he said simply. "I probably should have mentioned that before now, but I'm terrible at timing." Victoria's breath caught. "You love me?" "I've loved you since that night on the rooftop when you admitted you were tired of being alone. Maybe even before that." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to say it back. I know this is all moving fast and complicated, but I needed you to know." "I love you too," Victoria said, the words easier than she'd expected. "I think I've loved you since you brought me those ginger cookies and pretended it was no big deal." They kissed again, slower this time, and when Victoria finally fell asleep, it was with Daniel's hand in hers and the knowledge that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The 48 hours stretched into 5 days. Victoria's blood pressure refused to stabilize completely, hovering in the danger zone despite medication and rest. Dr. Morrison made the decision on day 6. "We're keeping you here until delivery," she said gently. "I know it's not ideal, but it's the safest option for both you and the baby." Victoria had expected to fight this decision, to argue and negotiate. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Okay, what do I need to do?" "Rest. Let the nurses take care of you. Try to keep stress levels down." Dr. Morrison smiled. "And based on what I've seen, let that man of yours keep visiting. He's good for your blood pressure." Over the next weeks, Victoria's hospital room transformed into a strange hybrid of home and office. Daniel brought her laptop so she could attend virtual meetings from bed. Emma visited after school, doing homework at the corner table and regaling Victoria with elaborate stories about her classmates. Patricia coordinated with the executive team, ensuring Victoria stayed informed without being overwhelmed. Sarah Chen stopped by one afternoon, bringing contraband coffee, decaf, but still better than hospital fare. "The board met yesterday," she said, settling into the visitor's chair. "Wanted me to tell you that the Q2 numbers are strong. Launch exceeded projections by 32%. "That's good," Victoria said, meaning it even as part of her mourned not being directly involved. "It is." "And Victoria?" Sarah leaned forward. "We miss you, but we're also doing okay." "You built something sustainable, not something that falls apart when you step back." "I'm starting to realize that," Victoria admitted. At 32 weeks, Victoria woke to a strange sensation, not quite pain, but definitely not normal. She pressed the call button, and within minutes, nurses descended, checking monitors and paging Dr. Morrison. "You're having contractions," the doctor confirmed. "Early labor. We're going to try to stop it, but if we can't, we'll need to deliver today." "It's too early," Victoria said, panic rising. 32 weeks is premature, but viable. We have an excellent NICU team." Dr. Morrison squeezed her hand. "Try to stay calm. Stress will only make this worse." Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, having broken several traffic laws based on how out of breath he was. "I got here as fast as I could. What's happening?" Victoria explained through another contraction, gripping his hand hard enough to leave marks. "Okay," he said, his voice steady even as she saw fear flash across his face. "Okay, we can do this. The baby's going to be fine. You're going to be fine." The next 6 hours were a blur of medical intervention. Medications to stop labor, steroid shots to help the baby's lungs develop, constant monitoring. Emma arrived with Daniel's mother, wide-eyed and scared but trying to be brave. "Is the baby coming now?" she whispered. "Maybe," Victoria said honestly. "The doctors are trying to wait a little longer, but sometimes babies have their own plans." "Can I stay? Until we know?" Daniel started to refuse, but Victoria caught his eye. "I'd like her to stay, if that's okay." So Emma curled up in the chair beside the bed, holding Victoria's hand through contractions and chattering nervously about everything and nothing. Daniel's mother sat quietly in the corner, her presence comforting in its steadiness. At midnight, Dr. Morrison made the call. "We can't stop the labor. It's time to deliver." Everything happened fast after that. They wheeled Victoria to the operating room, Daniel beside her in scrubs, squeezing her hand as the anesthesiologist explained the epidural procedure. "I'm scared," Victoria admitted as they prepped her for surgery. "Me too," Daniel said, "but we're doing this together, just like everything else." The surgery itself felt surreal. Pressure but no pain, the sounds of medical equipment and urgent voices. Daniel's face above hers murmuring reassurances. Then, suddenly, a thin cry that grew stronger. "It's a girl," Dr. Morrison announced, holding up a tiny, perfect baby girl covered in vernix and already screaming her displeasure at being evicted early. "She's so small," Victoria breathed, trying to see through tears. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, a nurse called out. "Good weight for 32 weeks, strong cry, pink color, looking good so far." They let Victoria see her for just a moment before whisking her away to the NICU, a glimpse of dark hair and flailing fists and eyes that would probably be brown like Daniel's. Then she was gone, and Victoria felt the loss like a physical ache. "You did amazing," Daniel said, kissing her forehead. "She's beautiful. She's perfect." "I couldn't even hold her," Victoria said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "You will, soon, I promise." The recovery was harder than Victoria had expected. The preeclampsia didn't magically resolve after delivery, keeping her in the hospital while their daughter, nameless still, because they couldn't agree and it felt wrong to decide without seeing her more, fought her way through the NICU milestones, breathing on her own, maintaining body temperature, taking bottles. Daniel split his time between Victoria's room and the NICU, bringing photos and updates. Emma visited the baby through the NICU window, pressing her hands against the glass with wonder.
She's so tiny, Emma marveled, like a doll, but real. She'll get bigger, Daniel assured her, and then you can hold her. What are we going to call her? Emma asked. We can't just keep saying the baby. That evening, Daniel brought a list they'd been compiling, names they both liked, names that felt right. Victoria was finally well enough to be in a wheelchair, and they sat together in the NICU, watching their daughter sleep in her isolette. She looks like a Sophia, Victoria said softly, studying the tiny face. Sophia Grace. Your middle name and my grandmother's name. Daniel tested it out. Sophia Grace Reed Hale. Or Hale Reed, Victoria suggested. I don't have strong feelings about the order. Sophia Grace Hale Reed, he said, smiling. It's perfect. She's perfect. When Sophia was 2 weeks old and Victoria was finally cleared to be discharged, they brought Emma to meet her sister properly. The nurse showed Emma how to support Sophia's head, how to hold her gently, and the 7-year-old looked down at the baby with pure adoration. Hi, Sophia, Emma whispered. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything, how to do cartwheels and make friendship bracelets, and which teachers at school are the nice ones. Victoria watched them together, Daniel's daughters, one by birth and one by choice, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. Sophia came home 3 weeks later, still tiny but healthy, passing every test the NICU threw at her. Daniel had spent the interim time baby-proofing both his house and Victoria's apartment, setting up nurseries in each location, coordinating schedules and backup plans with the precision of a military operation. We're really doing this, Victoria said the night before Sophia's discharge, sitting in Daniel's living room while Emma showed her the mobile she'd picked out for the nursery. We really are, Daniel confirmed. Terrified yet? Absolutely. You? Out of my mind. He pulled her close. But we've got this. We've handled everything else. We can handle one tiny baby. The first weeks home were chaos. Sophia had strong opinions about sleep schedules, about bottles, about being put down for even a moment. Victoria, still recovering from surgery and managing her blood pressure, felt overwhelmed more often than not. But Daniel was there, patient and steady, taking night shifts and soothing both Sophia and Victoria when emotions ran high. Emma proved to be a surprisingly helpful big sister, singing to Sophia when she cried and fetching diapers with the seriousness of someone on an important mission. Daniel's mother became a frequent presence, offering wisdom and extra hands when needed. At Sophia's 6-week checkup, Dr. Morrison examined Victoria as well, pronouncing her blood pressure finally stable and her recovery on track. You did it, the doctor said. Both of you are healthy. You can start resuming normal activities gradually. Define normal, Victoria said wryly, thinking of how completely her life had changed. That evening, she returned to her apartment, technically still her primary residence, though she spent most nights at Daniel's house, and found a stack of mail Patricia had been holding. Among the bills and business correspondence was an envelope with the company logo. Inside was a letter from the board, formally offering her a restructured role, CEO, with reduced travel requirements and a co-leadership model that allowed for better work-life balance. Sarah Chen had been promoted to president, sharing the operational load. Victoria read the letter twice, then called Daniel. They're restructuring my position, she said when he answered. Is that good or bad? I'm not sure yet. It's less control than I had before, but also less pressure, room to actually have a life outside work. She paused. I think I'm going to accept it. Yeah? She could hear the smile in his voice. Yeah, turns out the company doesn't need me to work 80-hour weeks to be successful, and Sophia needs a mother who's actually present. Victoria looked around her empty apartment, thinking of Daniel's house full of noise and life and love. Daniel, I think I want to sell this place. Move in with you and Emma properly, not just have my stuff scattered between 2 locations. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Victoria started to panic. Then Daniel said, voice thick with emotion, Are you sure? That's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything. Well, except maybe that night I asked you to leave the party with me. She laughed. Look how that turned out. Pretty well, all things considered, Daniel agreed. Victoria, I would love for you to move in. Emma would be thrilled, and Sophia probably won't notice, but someday we'll tell her this story.
3 months later, Victoria stood in what had been her apartment, now empty of furniture and personal items. Everything moved to Daniel's house, their house now. She took one last look at the space where she'd lived alone for so many years, where she'd first realized she was pregnant, where she'd learned to accept help and trust someone else with her vulnerability. "Ready?" Daniel asked from the doorway, Sophia asleep against his chest in a carrier. "Ready," Victoria confirmed, pulling the door closed behind her. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late October, small and intimate in Daniel's backyard. Emma served as flower girl and Sophia's protector, carrying the baby in careful arms down the makeshift aisle. Sarah Chen was Victoria's maid of honor, and Marcus stood up for Daniel, both of them grinning at how far their colleagues had come. Victoria wore a simple dress, nothing like the elaborate gown her mother had suggested. Daniel wore a suit that Emma had helped pick out, declaring it handsome enough for important days. When the officiant asked if they took each other, Victoria looked at Daniel, at this man who'd defended her to the board, who'd stayed beside her through medical crises, who'd taught her that asking for help wasn't weakness but trust, and said yes without hesitation. Their kiss was interrupted by Sophia's indignant cry, making everyone laugh. Emma rushed forward to soothe her sister, and the ceremony dissolved into joyful chaos as family and friends gathered around. Later, as the sun set and fairy lights twinkled in the trees, Victoria found herself slow dancing with Daniel while Emma supervised Sophia's first introduction to cake. "How does it feel?" Daniel asked. "Being Victoria Hale Reed, married woman?" "Strange. Wonderful. Terrifying." She smiled up at him. "Everything good in my life seems to be terrifying."
That's just because you spent so long avoiding anything that made you vulnerable. He kissed her softly. "How are you feeling about going back to work next week?" Victoria had negotiated a 4-month maternity leave, and tomorrow would mark her return to the office in her new restructured role. Nervous, excited, ready to prove that mothers can be effective leaders. "You're going to be amazing," Daniel assured her. "And I'll be home with Sophia, so I'll send you pictures every hour to remind you what you're working for." "Please don't. I'll never get anything done," he grinned. "That's the point." At the edge of the yard, Victoria's mother stood talking with Daniel's mother, the two women who'd been so skeptical of this unconventional arrangement now comparing notes on grandmothering. Margaret Stone was teaching Emma a card game, their laughter carrying across the lawn. "We did it," Victoria said softly. "We actually built something from this mess."
"It was never a mess," Daniel corrected. "It was just unexpected. The best things usually are." Emma ran over, Sophia in her arms. "Dad, Sophia needs you. I think she's tired." Daniel took the baby, who immediately settled against his chest with a contented sigh. Emma grabbed Victoria's hand. "This was the best day ever," Emma declared. "Now we're really a family, right? Like, official?" "We were always really a family," Victoria said, crouching down to Emma's level. "But yes, now it's official." "Good. Because I told my friend Lily that I have the coolest family, a dad who's really good at fixing things, a mom who runs a company, and a baby sister who's going to be super smart when she's older." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. "You think I'm your mom?" "Well, yeah," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You live with us, and you help with my homework, and you make Dad happy. That's what moms do." After Emma ran off to get more cake, Victoria straightened to find Daniel watching her with knowing eyes. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay." She looked around at the celebration, at the family and friends who'd supported them through an impossible situation, at the company colleagues who'd stepped up when she'd needed to step back, at the daughters who'd made her heart expand beyond what she'd thought possible. "I spent so long thinking I had to choose between success and family, between strength and vulnerability. Turns out I was asking the wrong question." "What's the right question?" "Not whether I can have both, but whether I'm brave enough to build a life that includes both. To be strong enough to be vulnerable." She leaned into him, feeling Sophia's warmth between them. "And it turns out I am. Because of you." Daniel kissed her temple. "We make each other brave. That's the secret." As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Victoria found herself standing alone for a moment, watching Daniel play with Emma while Sophia slept in her carrier nearby. 6 months ago, she'd stood in an executive bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test and feeling her world crack apart. She'd thought it was the end of everything she'd built. Instead, it had been the beginning of something infinitely better. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Chen. "Enjoy your last night before the chaos of working motherhood begins. You're going to crush it, just like everything else. Proud of you, boss." Victoria smiled, typing back, "Proud of us. See you Monday." Because that was the final lesson she'd learned through all of this, that she didn't have to do everything alone, that accepting help and building partnerships didn't diminish her strength but multiplied it, that sometimes the unplanned moments, the ones that terrified you and forced you to grow, were the ones that gave life its deepest meaning. Daniel caught her eye from across the yard and smiled, and Victoria smiled back, feeling the weight of the wedding ring on her finger, a symbol not of ownership or obligation, but of choice and commitment and the kind of love that grew from honesty rather than perfection. "Ready to go home?" Daniel called out. Victoria looked at Emma gathering her flowers, at Sophia sleeping peacefully, at the man who'd stood beside her through every impossible moment. "Yeah," she said, walking toward them. "Let's go home." And as they packed up the remnants of the celebration and drove back to the house they now shared, Victoria realized that somewhere along the way, between the panic and the preeclampsia and the chaos of new parenthood, she'd found something she hadn't known she was looking for. Not just a family, though she had that now in abundance. Not just love, though that too had found her when she'd stopped running from it. She'd found herself. Not the perfect CEO who never made mistakes, not the woman who needed no one, but someone braver and more complete. Someone who knew that real strength meant building a life that mattered with people who mattered, even when that life looked nothing like the plan. Especially when it looked nothing like the plan. Because the best things, as Daniel had said, usually were unexpected. And this messy, complicated, beautiful family they'd accidentally created and then intentionally built, this was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Even if it had started with 2 pink lines and a moment of pure terror, especially because it had started that way.